Hello Internet! In the months of October and November, I read 28 books, so we're gonna go through them. Starting with October, the first book I read was The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. This was alright. I do not remember the plot at all. It was a little bit underwhelming. 3 stars. The next book I read was Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare, which is the first book in the Infernal Devices trilogy, which is a prequel to the Mortal Instruments series, which I have not read, but I did start this one in October, and I really enjoyed this. 4 stars. The next book I read was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This is very atmospheric, old haunted Victorian house vibe. A bit of a slower read, but amazing. I really enjoyed this book. 4 stars. The next book I read was As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson, the third in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy. It's a wild ride and took such a turn that I was not expecting. 4 stars. Clockwork Prince by Cassandra Clare, which is the second in the Infernal Devices series. I really enjoyed this book again. The visceral reaction I had to this book. I was in so much inner turmoil. 4 stars. Oh damn, okay. I just peed my pants. I literally just peed my pants. The next book I read was The Woods Are Always Watching by Stephanie Perkins. This was meh to me. I was really bored the whole time. Didn't really care. I only finished it because it's a pretty short book, like 200 something pages. So I just don't think it was for me. 2.5, 3 stars if I'm being generous. It's just not for me. And the next book was A Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare, which is the third and final in the Infernal Devices series, and it was amazing. I think this whole series got me out of a little bit of a reading slump. I really loved the world and the characters, and I will never recover from Tessa, Will, and Jim and how their storyline was written. I will think about it all of the time. I am very attached to these characters now. I read this in the beginning of October and I constantly think about them. And the epilogue made me feel things. For why? So 5 stars. I did really enjoy this series. The next book I read, The Ravens by Cass Morgan, which is basically witches in a sorority. It's very fun and very fitting for Spooky Month, but I literally remember nothing that happens. I just go off vibes and I had a good time. So I give it 4 stars. The next book I read was Small Favors by Myrna Craig, and whoa, this is like a thriller horror set in a small village. I really was not expecting to love this book as much as I did. The spooky, eerie, dark vibes were immaculate, and it's kind of a slower paced book, but at the same time it was one that I did not want to put down. A lot of chaos that ensues later on is just beautiful. This is really close to 5 stars, but I settled on 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed the spooky dark vibes. So fun. We Could Be Villains by Megan McCullough? I'm so sorry. This is like, what if your favorite fictional superheroes were actually real and the studios / production that made the films were a front to cover them up? I read this because it was $1 on Kindle after I saw a TikTok about it, and I was like, that seems fun. Why not? The concept is like ridiculous, and it had that fan fiction-y kind of vibe. Not in a bad way. Writing was not the greatest. Neither was the plot, but it was still fun. And I think there's a lot of potential. Just like missed the mark a few times. So 3.5 stars. The next book I read was The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen. And I'm not gonna lie, the main reason I bought this book was because of the hardcovers. I mean, look at this. This is beautiful. This is so cool. It had a really strong start and it got a little muddled in the middle towards the end plot-wise. And I wish it delved a little bit more into the kingdoms and the people that reside in them so I could form an attachment to the things that they were fighting for, because there is an opportunity to do that. There was a perfect opportunity and it just didn't do it. It's very centered, I think, around the main characters themselves, which is perfectly fine. I just found myself wanting a little bit more, and it just like was missing a few things for me personally. 3.5 stars. Gallant by V.E. Schwab. Darker, spooky kind of vibes, ghosts, ghouls, all that. Slower paced kind of book. I personally was way more intrigued in like a side plot or like the backstory of the main character than her story itself. I would much rather have read a story about that. It was good Spooky Month vibes though. It's very atmospheric too, I think. There's also an old Victorian house in this one. I liked it, but it just wasn't totally my vibe, so 3.5 stars. The next book I read was Vicious by V.E. Schwab, and this was a reread. It's amazing, show-stopping, one of my favorite books of all time. I think it is actually my favorite book of all time. Nothing has topped this. Six of Crows is probably a close second, but I still think this runs out. It was even better the second time around. A best friends to enemies, and it becomes a cat and mouse chase of them trying to kill the other. It's like about revenge. And every single character basically is morally gray, which is just amazing. I could go on and on and on and on about this book, but I will not. I will spare you. Save that for another video. However, I will leave you with my original review when I first read it, which was I love me some morally fraudulent characters paired with extraordinary powers and a story that was fast-paced and intriguing. I want more books like this. So fun rereading it. It is heavily tabbed, heavily underlined. I don't do that very often. Absolutely love this book so much. Okay, so the last book I read in October was Scythe by Neal Shusterman. This concept is super interesting. Nobody dies in this futuristic world. They have to combat that with the scythes and then like the problems that come with having that power, being able to kill, or gleanings as they call it, to maintain population because just nobody dies. Very interesting. It's a very high 4 stars, and I will for sure be reading the next book, which I already own at some point. All right, that's October. Moving on to November, the first book I read was Violet Made of Thorns by Gina Chen. This is like a prince in the castle's seer or castle's witch. It's from the witch's perspective. Enchanting dark fantasy. I really enjoyed it. It was super fun. Maybe basic, maybe a lot basic, but tropes are tropes for a reason. I don't think there's a lot of like depth to the characters really, but you know, I had a great time. 4 stars. Side note, the princess was iconic and I loved her. So the next book I read was Captive Prince by C.S. Pacat. I really don't know how I should feel about this book, so 3 stars. This Blood That Binds Us by S.L. Coakley. This one also, these both came out in November, I believe. I bought this one immediately because I'd seen it on TikTok and it just seemed like a fun time. It's a vampire book set in college where the main vampire is like basically golden retriever energy. I had a good time, and there's definitely a lot of setup for a book 2, which there is going to be one, and I think I will probably pick that book up whenever it comes out. 4 stars. The next book I read was Sorcery of Thorns. This is probably my favorite book that I read in these past couple months. Has a place on my all-time favorites now. I highly recommend it. It was so fun. Magical libraries and a snarky sorcerer. Yes, please. I saw someone say that this gives off Howl's Moving Castle vibes, and I 1000% agree. So if that's your vibe, I really enjoyed it. It's so fun. And I just learned that there's going to be a novella right after this that comes out in January, and I will be buying that as soon as it comes out because cozy fantasy vibes with these characters. Yes, please! 5 stars, really high 5 stars, one of my favorites. Highly recommend. The next book I read was Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. It's a spooky tale of a small town ghost legend. I love the storytelling of this book. It's like flipping between interviews, video evidence, text threads, in present time, almost like a case file type thing. So you're figuring it out through the story itself and video footage. It's just really interesting. I really love the storytelling and how the story was presented. I don't know how to explain this, but this story feels like it'd be something that is in the Magnus Archives, if you know what that is. That's kind of the vibes it gave off to me. Very, very fun, spooky times. 4 stars. The next book I read was Belladonna by Adeline Grace. Turns into a murder mystery, solving a murder with death. It's kind of like a gothic romance, kind of. Is that right? Also, the hardcover of this book is super pretty as well. Like, look at that. Look at that. That's so cool. I love when hardcover books have a interesting design like this. The vibes were great, and it's not a standalone. I'm quite excited to see where it's gonna go. You came, you called vibes, kind of a little bit. Quote that I really like, which there's no such thing as true goodness, there's only perception. One last little note I wrote while reading it because it's just too funny not to share. There's this part where I wrote, he's a little possessive here, but my man's has waited a millennia. I'll let it pass. Anyways, next book was Neverworld Wake, Marisha Pessl. This book is like a Groundhog Day type story with a group of friends, and the only way they can get out of this Groundhog Day time loop is if everyone votes for the same person to survive, to get out of it. Such an addicting, you do not want to put this book down read. Once you are in it, you are in. Super fast paced. And the twists, I was literally speechless after I read this. I had to stare at the ceiling in shocked silence for like 30 minutes to contemplate it. Also, read it practically in one sitting, which was not my plan. I started this book after I had finished this one, and I was like, okay, I'll just start it. I'll just start it because, you know, I still got the rest of my day left. And then I ended up staying up really late and finishing it basically in one sitting. Really, really good. I really enjoyed it. I think it's like close to 5 stars, but 4.5 stars. The next book I read was Hotel Magnifique by Emily J. Taylor, and this is like a magical hotel that moves every night, but not everything is what it seems. It was really fun. I liked the vibes, I liked the magical aspect, but I just felt like it was missing something for me, so 4 stars. The the Traitor Queen with the second of the Bridge Kingdom. And again, oh, there's tabs still in here. Take those out. But again, look at the cover. Beautiful. Also, something that's really cool about these is that they connect like that, and the third one connects like to the bottom, so it makes like it makes the map. How cool is that? I'm literally obsessed, and I will buy all the books even if I don't like them, because I like this one a bit better than the first. So 4 stars. Where do I start with this one? Trapped in Time by Denise Day, and this was a complete curveball of a read. It was like $2 on Kindle. I read it in one sitting, but it was super fun. Exactly what I wanted at that moment. Our main character accidentally time travels back into 1880s and attempts to get back. But as a woman in that time period, the only way to get access to things is to get married to a rich man. So what does she do? That's right, comes up with a plan to woo one of the rich men with high status. It was a historical time travel romance, and I love time travel stuff, so I eat that up. It was such a it was so like random, you know, so random, but really fun. It was one of those reads that like, was the writing great? No. Was the plot great? No. Did I have a good time? Yes. 4 stars. You've Reached Sam by Dustin Tao? I think that's how you say it. I was underwhelmed by this book. I don't think it was really for me. I didn't really feel anything. It was fine. 3.5 stars. The Silvered Serpents. That is a tongue twister. The Silvered Serpents. Yeah, no. The Silvered Serpents by Roshani Chokshi. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. This was the second of The Gilded Wolves, which I read like back in April, and I really liked it. I just hadn't gotten to it yet. I do love the cast of characters and that found family aspect a lot, and paired with the premise of like magical treasure hunting. It's really fun, but I found that I struggle to really get into this world for some reason. Like, I love the characters, I love the idea, but reading it, I just kind of struggle to fully get into it. I had to kind of a little bit force myself to read it. I still enjoyed it. I think it was a good time, so 4 stars. And I will be finishing the series off. Next book I read was Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. I think this book was really fun. I did not write anything in my notes about it. This is, you know, a historical fiction about Jack the Ripper in the... Oh, there's my tabs in this one too. It's in like the twist that was pulled on it. Very dark, but very fun. 4 stars. And the last book I read was another Kindle book, because I've been in the mood where I like to have one book on my phone that I can read, and then I'm out and about and I'm not carrying a book with me, you know? Was We Could Be Villains for a while, and also The Captive Prince. The Last Daughter by Alexis L. Menard. And this book had a really strong start for me. Like, I really loved the beginning to the middle. Like, that part was super fun. And then it just kind of turned into something that I was just not my vibe. So I ended up not really liking it towards the end. I give it a 2.5, 3 stars. Also, this book was another completely random book read, because it was a couple dollars on Kindle, and then I got really invested in it, and then I just had to force myself to finish it because there was like 60 pages left and I was so done with it. I didn't really want to read it anymore, but I needed to see how it finished. Alright, and that is every single book that I read in October and November. 28 total. So there's 14 per month. I don't know how I managed to level it out to exactly 14 each month. Don't know how that happened. Out of all the books that I read, I would recommend the most Small Favors, of course Vicious, my all-time favorite, so good. The Inferno Device series, Sorcery of Thorns, Neverworld Wake, I think was so good, Belladonna, and Home Before Dark. Those would be my top ones that I would recommend. I never said bye while I was filming, so bye! Thank you for watching, you little rascals.